It's easy to look at someone like Johnny Depp and assume they have it all. A famous career, millions of fans, and endless opportunities at their fingertips. But what if that image of perfection is only skin deep? What if, behind all that fame and fortune, there's a much darker story that the public rarely sees? Johnny Depp's battle with his ex-wife, Amber Heard, is a story that not only rocked Hollywood but also showed us the real cost of fame, the emotional toll of public battles, and the power of perseverance. We're talking about a war fought in the courtrooms and the media, where both parties had their own version of the truth. At the center of it all was Johnny Depp, a man who had spent decades building a legacy in Hollywood but suddenly found himself fighting for his reputation, his career, and his very identity. For anyone watching from the outside, it seemed like an open and shut case. Amber Heard had accused Depp of abuse, and the media quickly sided with her. The headlines were brutal, and the accusations were serious. But as the battle unfolded, Johnny Depp's side of the story started to emerge, showing a much more complicated and painful reality. Imagine waking up every day to find your name in the headlines for something you didn't do. Imagine being constantly judged by the public, your career on the line, your every word and action dissected by critics. That's what Johnny Depp faced when the accusations against him began to spiral out of control. The weight of it all must have been unbearable. As the media painted him as the villain, Depp was forced to watch from the sidelines as his reputation was torn apart. But here's the thing, Johnny Depp refused to just stand by and let it happen. He wasn't going to let the world define him based on the lies of one person. For Depp, it wasn't just about proving he wasn't the monster the media had made him out to be. It was about fighting for the truth, his truth. This battle was more than just a legal fight. It was about reclaiming his identity, his dignity, and his place in the world. Every accusation, every false claim that was made against him, was a punch to the gut. But Johnny Depp kept fighting. Even when it seemed like he was losing, he kept going. He wasn't going to let anyone dictate his story, and he wasn't going to let the world forget who he truly was. But before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's take a moment to understand the context of this bitter battle. Depp and Heard's relationship wasn't exactly smooth sailing. Like many celebrity couples, their marriage was full of ups and downs, but it wasn't until their divorce that things took a turn for the worse. The allegations of abuse came out after the split, and once they were out there, they stuck. It wasn't just about the divorce anymore, it was about the accusations of violence, and the public's perception of who Depp really was. As more details emerged, Depp found himself in the crosshairs of the media, and it didn't matter what was true or not. The damage had already been done. Public opinion was divided, with many rallying behind Amber Heard, believing her accusations without question. And who could blame them? The media loves a scandal, especially when it involves high-profile celebrities. The more sensational the story, the more clicks it gets, and the more people talk about it. But Johnny Depp didn't just sit back and let his name be tarnished. He took action. He didn't hide from the controversy, he confronted it head-on. He went to court, fought back against the accusations, and told his side of the story. He stood there in front of the world and said, "This isn't who I am." And slowly, piece by piece, his story started to be heard. It wasn't just about clearing his name, it was about setting the record straight. And despite the odds, Johnny Depp started to win back the trust of his fans, his colleagues, and even some of the public. But let's not forget, this battle wasn't easy. Johnny Depp was up against a well-funded and well-publicized machine, and it seemed like every turn he took, there was another obstacle in his path. At times, it felt like the world was against him. The media, the public, and even his peers seemed to be writing him off as guilty before the evidence was even considered. It's tough to imagine what that must have felt like. But Depp didn't let it break him. He kept pushing forward, even when it seemed like no one was listening. One of the hardest parts of this battle was dealing with the mental and emotional toll it took on Depp. He had spent decades building a career in Hollywood, and now he found himself on the defensive, constantly fighting to protect his name. The stress, the anxiety, the constant media scrutiny, it would break most people. But Johnny Depp, despite everything, showed incredible resilience. He didn't just sit back and let the world judge him, he took control of his own narrative. And that's where the lesson comes in. Johnny Depp's story isn't just about a famous celebrity in a messy divorce. It's about the importance of standing up for yourself, even when it feels like the world is against you. It's about the strength it takes to keep going when everything seems stacked against you. Depp's fight for his reputation shows us that no matter how tough things get, you can always rise above the noise and reclaim your life. But that doesn't mean it's easy. It means that you have to dig deep, find your inner strength, and keep pushing forward, no matter what. One of the most profound turning points in Johnny Depp's journey through the public legal battle with Amber Heard came when he began to reflect on everything that had happened. Looking back on the chaos, the false accusations, and the relentless media scrutiny, Depp found himself at a crossroads. While the court case was a significant part of the journey, there was something deeper at play, something beyond the legal victory. As much as he fought for justice and the truth, Depp came to the realization that the battle wasn't just about winning the case or proving his innocence. It was about finding a way to rebuild himself, to heal from the emotional wounds that had been inflicted during this painful time. The real work, he understood, was to find peace within himself. The public battle had drained him in ways that were not immediately visible. Everyone could see the courtroom drama, the headlines, and the controversies that swirled around him, but what most didn't realize was the toll it took on his soul. Johnny Depp had spent so much of his life trying to prove himself to the world, trying to live up to the expectations of fame, success, and admiration. He was always seen as the quirky, unpredictable actor who brought characters like Captain Jack Sparrow to life, the one who defied norms and never cared much for public opinion. But behind the public persona, behind the sunglasses and the million-dollar smile, there was a man who was deeply affected by the events that had unfolded in his personal life. The public eye, for all its glitz and glamour, can be an unforgiving and harsh place, especially when a person's entire character is put under the microscope. Depp's realization came not in the form of a sudden epiphany, but rather as a gradual understanding. It wasn't until he was deep into the court case, facing the consequences of every allegation, and enduring the relentless attacks on his character, that he started to understand something crucial. The anger, hurt, and bitterness that had consumed him were not only weighing down his ability to move forward, they were also controlling his life. Each day, he found himself trapped in the emotions of resentment, frustration, and grief. These emotions, while completely understandable given the circumstances, were keeping him tethered to the pain. The battle he was fighting, however, wasn't just about clearing his name. It was about finding a way to break free from the hold these negative emotions had on him. One of the most difficult aspects of this whole ordeal was how personal the attacks were. It wasn't just about allegations in a courtroom, it was about public perceptions that cut deep into his identity. To have your character publicly questioned, to be painted as someone you didn't recognize, is a deeply isolating experience. Depp had spent years building his career, cultivating an image that was largely seen as genuine, authentic, and charismatic. To suddenly be accused of things that were completely at odds with the person he knew himself to be, that's something that can shake anyone to their core. The emotional toll was far greater than any media outlet or legal opponent could fully comprehend. As he reflected on the way his life had been turned upside down, Depp realized that the trial wasn't the only battle he had to win. He had to learn to let go of the toxic emotions that had taken root. He couldn't continue to fight every day with anger and bitterness. That anger, while justified in many ways, wasn't going to heal him. It wasn't going to make the pain go away. Instead, it was slowly eating away at him from the inside. It was preventing him from moving forward, from truly recovering, from finding the peace he desperately needed. In the aftermath of everything, Depp began to understand that healing wasn't just about winning a case. It wasn't just about restoring his reputation or getting back to work. Healing meant forgiving himself for the pain he had carried for so long. It meant releasing the anger that had been simmering inside him for months, and in some ways, years. It meant finding a way to let go of the resentment that had built up over the years of public scrutiny and false accusations. For so long, he had been driven by the need to prove himself, to fight back against every single attack, but that constant battle was never going to bring him peace. So, how does someone like Johnny Depp, with everything on the line and the weight of the world on his shoulders, begin to reclaim that peace? For Depp, it was about embracing the idea that his worth wasn't determined by the opinions of others. He had to come to terms with the fact that, despite what the public or the media said, he was still the same person he had always been. He had to re-establish his connection with himself and accept that the opinions of others, no matter how loud or persistent, didn't define him. It wasn't about ignoring the pain or pretending that the damage didn't exist, it was about choosing to focus on what he could control, his own healing process. For Depp, this meant letting go of the need to respond to every false accusation, every negative headline, and every person who tried to tear him down. He realized that, in order to heal, he needed to stop fighting a battle that had already taken a significant toll on him. The more he fought against the negativity, the more it kept him stuck in a cycle of pain. At some point, you have to stop fighting what cannot be changed and start focusing on what you can change, yourself. By letting go of the anger, the hurt, and the bitterness, Depp started to create space for peace to enter his life once again. Finding peace wasn't an overnight process. It took time, patience, and a lot of emotional work. It wasn't just about winning a legal case or getting back into the public's good graces. It was about finding balance within himself, rediscovering his inner peace, and learning to forgive, both others and himself. He had to forgive the people who had wronged him, but he also had to forgive himself for the mistakes, the missteps, and the times he let his emotions get the best of him. One of the hardest parts of this journey for Depp was the realization that he had been holding on to a narrative for so long that no longer served him. For years, he had lived with the belief that he had to prove himself to the world. But as he reflected on the events that had unfolded, Depp began to see that he didn't need to prove anything to anyone. He had done enough in his career, in his personal life, and in the fight to clear his name. The only person he needed to prove anything to was himself. The healing process wasn't easy for Depp. There were days when the anger would resurface, when the pain would become overwhelming, when the hurt would feel too raw. But each time, he had to remind himself that peace wasn't a destination, it was a journey. Every step he took towards letting go of the negative emotions, every moment he spent learning to accept the things he could not change, was another step closer to the peace he sought. And slowly, but surely, Depp began to reclaim his sense of self. As the dust began to settle and the media circus died down, Depp was left with a choice, to continue to dwell in the anger, resentment, and hurt, or to choose peace and move forward. His decision to choose peace was one of the most important decisions he could make. It wasn't just about recovering from the trial or the media storm, it was about rebuilding his life and finding happiness again. Depp's journey was no longer about proving himself to the world. It was about proving to himself that he was capable of healing, of moving forward, and of finding joy once again. In the end, Johnny Depp's reflection on his life and his battle wasn't just about the court case, it was about rediscovering his peace. And for anyone who's gone through a difficult time, whether it's a public battle, a personal struggle, or just the everyday challenges of life, Depp's journey serves as a reminder that healing comes from within. It's about letting go of the things that weigh us down and choosing to embrace the peace we deserve. That's what Johnny Depp ultimately found, and it's something we can all strive for in our own lives. This is where Depp's story really takes on a deeper meaning. It's not just about clearing your name or fighting for justice, it's about finding peace within yourself after a long and difficult battle. Whether you're dealing with a public scandal or a private struggle, the ability to forgive yourself and move forward is one of the hardest things to do. But it's also one of the most important. In Johnny Depp's case, it wasn't just about proving he was right, it was about finding a way to heal from the trauma of being publicly judged and criticized. And that's where the real strength lies. It's easy to fight back when you're in the right, but it's much harder to fight back and remain strong when everything around you is falling apart. Depp's journey shows us that the real battle isn't always in the courtroom or in front of the media, it's within yourself. It's about finding the strength to keep going, to keep fighting for what's right, and to never lose sight of who you truly are. Johnny Depp's battle with Amber Heard is more than just a story of a bitter divorce or a public scandal. It's a story of resilience, of fighting for your truth, and of the strength it takes to overcome obstacles that seem insurmountable. Depp's journey has taught us that no matter how tough things get, we can always find a way to rise above the noise and come out stronger on the other side. And that's a lesson that we can all carry with us, no matter what challenges we face in life. So, the next time you find yourself facing a tough situation, remember Johnny Depp's story. Remember that the fight isn't over until you say it is. And most importantly, remember that no matter what happens, your truth is yours to own. Don't let anyone take that away from you. You've got this.